It's about what you know. It's about where you go. If you really want to know, it's the Leo Larry Show. It's about what you know. It's about where you go. If you really want to know, it's the Leo Larry Show.
Hello, how are you once again, our friends, and welcome to the Leo and Larry Show. I'm Leo.
And I'm Larry.
And welcome to the program that helps you know what's going on so you know where to go and what to do to make your life, our community, our state, our nation, and our world a better place. Larry, great to see you.
It's great to see you. It's been a while. We've both been traveling in different directions.
Oh yeah,
so we seem like we all of a sudden we got busy.
Yes.
And I guess that's good for business, but it keeps us from our primary duty of being the activists we are.
And then, I tell people all of the time that the way to not have a parochial or a limited view is to realize that we're citizens of Florence, we're citizens of South Carolina, we're citizens of the United States of America, but we're really citizens of the world. And so we don't have to limit ourselves to this place or that place. And that's why we travel, right?
Well, that's why we travel. And I think one of the things, Brother Woodbury, is that the challenge basically is we travel to learn. And we learn a great deal about traveling. But there is not a true statement made then that we're the citizens of the world at this particular point. I see some of the things that President Biden is doing. And while I think he's doing a good job, I really do. I believe he's doing an exceptional job with the burden that he has on his shoulder. I'm amazed that he still wants to have a nationalistic attitude about business and world affairs. And I don't know whether you realize this, but Elon Musk basically decided that he was going to join the Republican Party because Joe Biden was pushing the GM car and the Ford electric car above Elon Musk's cars. And saying that they were the next thing coming in, be the best thing, they were going to be the best thing in the world. And he basically became a cheerleader for GM and Ford. Well, in a world economy, our president really can't afford to take that position.
Absolutely.
And so, like I said, truer words are never stated than that. We're in a world economy. What happens in China affects us today. What happens anywhere in the world affects us today. Our economy is having challenges, not because of what we're doing in America, but because of what people are doing across the world, what oil prices are, what gas prices are, what wheat prices are. So we're being affected in a very, very negative way because we haven't really joined into that world economy. We still want to isolate ourselves to a certain extent. But that being said, Reverend Woodbury, I wanted to kind of touch base for a minute and say a couple of words about a good friend of all of ours, a good friend of the community, Sam Frank. I don't know whether a whole lot of the listeners know who Sam Frank is. Sam Frank owned Conway Ford for about 40 years down in Conway. He's a businessman. He's a person who was community oriented, spent a lot of money and a lot of time investing in community programs, community activities, especially things like United Negro College Fund, where he raised money for the college fund. And he was the architect of business in this region, one of the architects, I should say, of business in this region of the state. He joins people like Mr. James Byrd and people like that. And unfortunately for us, we lost him this week. And that loss is going to resonate across our community because of his convictions and because of his commitment to the community and because he came along on a time when small businesses and black-owned businesses, and owning a car dealership for a black man was almost a pipe dream.
Mhm.
And for as long as I've been here, and I've been here for almost 40 years, he's owned Conway Ford. He and Mike Rickenbacker and TJ Johnson have all been in joint ventures together and owning it combined. I think they all owned about 13 to 14 car dealerships across the Southeast United States and even into the Caribbean. So I think he's going to be well missed, not just in Conway, but in Florence and across the state of South Carolina. He served on the board of Coastal Carolina, and he was a visionary in the truest sense of the word.
Yes, absolutely. We'll miss Brother Frank. And, you know, a lot of people don't realize the power that the business, you know, business owners and the business community can have. You know, we have a lot of Black business owners today who unfortunately are not as engaged as Sam Frank and Mr. Byrd and others were. And you know, even when you read about the civil rights movement and Dr. King, that it wasn't just the celebrities, the Sammy Davis Jr.'s and the Harry Belafontes and the Frank Sinatras that were helping to fund that movement, but it was Black business people across the South. And just like when we look at the GMs and we look at the Fords and we look at the Duke energy companies and how they actually can influence what goes on in this country, this state, and in our community, all business owners have that same power if they have vision and they realize that as the community goes, that's how their business goes too. Don't you agree?
I agree to a large extent, Reverend Woodbury, but I think one of the biggest challenges of African American businesses today is they kind of adapted a policy, unlike the one that you talked about earlier, where Black businesses in the community, funeral homes, barbershops, beauty shops, funded the civil rights movement.
Mhm.
That's where the meetings were held. That was where things happened. But they didn't just fund it from that particular standpoint. They funded through the fact that they donated money to the cause,
Mhm.
and they donated money to the activists who were outspoken in the community, and they helped the activists get their message out. I was telling a young man earlier, I've been, on this path and on this trail since I was 15 years old. And I saw firsthand how some of the leaders in the community, not just in Columbia, but even when I got to Florence, one of the first pictures somebody showed me when I got to Florence was those people, a group of about 25 or 30 Black business leaders who got together. And Bob Jolly talked about this a lot. Bob Jolly was alive. He talked about this a lot. He talked about how they paid him and they supplemented him to make sure that he went out and raised enough hell and did the things that needed to be done and said the things that needed to be done and challenged the system in a way that was challenging the system. Now we have Black business owners
Mhm.
who are so committed to the dollar itself.
Right. They're not engaged.
That even though they sell hamburgers and chicken,
Mhm.
fried chicken
Mhm.
to our community, they don't see the need to invest in our community. They're investing in anything but our community. And I think that's the tragedy of leadership, that leadership in our community is, and I start to cease to use the word leadership, because I refuse to call you a leader if you're only a leader in name.
Mhm.
If you happen to be a large business owner, if you happen to be an elected official, I refuse to call you a leader. I call you a voice.
Mhm.
You're one of a whole bunch of voices in our community, and all of them are striving to kind of find their place. But if you're a leader, you lead.
Mhm.
And we haven't seen a lot of the people, Black business owners and a lot of Black elected officials lead.
Mhm.
So how can they indeed call themselves leaders? And why would we recognize them as leaders
Mhm.
if they're not leading?
Absolutely. And you know, you're reminding me, I wrote this piece. It was, oh boy, a long time ago, maybe 15, 20 years ago, and you published it in the Community Time. It was called The Crisis of Black Leadership. But really, today, in the era that we live in, we could talk about the crisis of leadership in general. And one of the things that was in that article that you talked about now, that just because you are, just because you are genetically related to someone by blood, who maybe they accomplish a lot of things and were a true leader, doesn't make you a leader. Just because you are successful in business or entertainment doesn't make you a leader. Just because you form an organization and give yourself a title doesn't mean that you're a leader. To be a leader, you have to have a vision, you have to have a platform, you have to have programs, and you have to have goals and objectives that you're putting forth to help your constituents, your community, whoever you call yourself representing. And if you're a business leader, realize that those people who frequent your establishment, that if they are doing bad, then they don't have money to come and shop in your establishment. I think that's why both of us have always been so committed to looking at the community economic development piece, because we know that if our people and all people don't have resources, then they can't participate in this great experiment that we call capitalism, or even in terms of self-determination and other things.
Leaders need to be able to take the heat. I get feedback from my newspaper on a weekly basis from somebody who says, well, I don't like that story you ran on such and such, or I don't like that story you ran on such and such. And I'll tell them point blank, there are certain stories that I run in my newspaper that I'm not particularly fond of, but there are stories that need to be told. And then I think that's a challenge. If you're a leader, you got to stand for something. You got to speak up for something. You can't say I'm a leader and then all you do is show up and be quiet.
Going along to get along, and not realizing that leaders push the envelope. That's how we make progress. It doesn't mean that you're a disruptor or a usurper of somebody else's power or position. But if you're a leader, you're pushing the envelope. You're saying we're doing well, but we can do better. Don't you agree?
I agree, and I'm not disagreeing from me. I'm agreeing with Frederick Douglass, who said, if there's no struggle, there's no progress.
That's right.
And so when we talk about, when I go to a city council meeting or a county council meeting, and there's an unanimous vote like there was in the reapportionment of the school district recently, and there's a unanimous vote to support a particular position, even if you don't agree with it, that is not what we were taught to do. That is not how we're supposed to function. If I disagree with something, I say it publicly. I don't go along to get along. I've heard city councilmen and county councilmen over the last few years say things like, well, I'm not going to ruffle anybody's feathers. I'm not going to make any noise. I'm not going to disagree with the majority. So why are you there? What is your point in being there? Sometimes the majority is wrong.
Absolutely.
And sometimes even the minority is wrong. But the whole idea basically is that if you don't speak up, how do I know how you feel? And is it really that important for you to have to find peace in not speaking up? And I remember joining the United Way board about 20 years ago, and I have a friend in Columbia, still have him, and he's pretty active in the Columbia community and had been a member of the United Way board. And I called her. I said, I've just been placed on the United Way board. What do you think I should do? He said, just be quiet. He said, don't say anything. Just be quiet. Just listen.
mhm,
Just listen. And you know, it got to a point where there were certain things that were being said and certain things that were being done that you just could not be quiet.
mhm,
You could just not say something. I don't expect people to run and follow me everywhere I go and say, okay, Larry Smith is right about everything, because Larry Smith is gonna be wrong too.
mhm,
That's the reality of life. But the truth of the matter is that when I state an opinion, it's my opinion.
mhm,
It's me saying, this is who I am. This is how I feel about this issue. Now, nine out of 10 people may not feel the way I feel about that issue.
mhm,
And that issue may pass through whatever body is coming through. It may pass, and they may uh, decide that's in the best interest of the community. And who cares what Larry Smith thinks?
mhm.
And that's okay. But let the record show that Larry Smith said what he thought.
Right.
And too many times in our community, we don't say what we think.
Well, I think part of the problem too is that if you lift up a concern, you have to be knowledgeable about it. You have to know about alternative solutions to the one that may be being put forth by a body, city council, county council, Congress, or whatever. And so if you are not keeping up with things and you don't know about alternatives, it's so easy to raise your hand and just go along and vote with the crowd. So, you mentioned President Biden. So you look at his Inflation Reduction Act. Inflation is a huge problem in this country. It's exasperated the problem around hunger. You have people now who can't buy food. You go in the supermarket, I don't care if it's Walmart or others, you see empty shelves. And so if you're not aware of that, if you don't know where the food deserts are, where the people who are in your city, in your county, who are challenged when it comes to food, then and the alternatives that people have out there, the solutions that people in other places in South Carolina in the country, solutions they have put in place to help alleviate that, then when it comes up at a meeting and someone says this is the solution, they have to remain silent because they have nothing to say. To be a leader, you have to constantly be keeping yourself knowledgeable about what's going on. You have to be informed, and you have to have a certain level of experience. And if you don't have those things, then you can't, you're bound to just go along with what other people are saying. And I dare say that a lot of the people who say they are leaders aren't knowledgeable, aren't informed. And even people in the community, when they bring up something to them, so many times I've heard elected officials say, we're working on that.
Well, I think, Reverend Rivera, I think one of the biggest challenges is you live in a very, very strongly populated African American community.
Mhm,
You're not doing a drive-by in your community and trying to guess what's going on. You see it every day.
mhm,
When you wake up and go out of your house, you see it every day. I don't live in what's predominantly Black community,
mhm,
and I'm atypical of Black, quote unquote, Black leadership. We don't live in traditionally Black communities. Even if we live in traditionally Black communities, we live in middle class
mhm,
Black communities. So when you talk about things like food deserts, and you talk about economics, and you talk about recession, and you talk about the availability of food to our community, the availability of jobs to our community, quality jobs to our community, I should say. If all I get is a drive-by view
mhm,
of that, then, and I'm not reading the 10,000 reports that come out a week on that issue. So what you've gotten is you've gotten people who are so socially involved and so socially conscious. I want to be at the right party. I want to be at the right club. I want to be
At
at
the
the
right
right
meeting.
church. I want to be at the right meeting. But how many times, how many nights do you spend reading those reports that come to you, not just as an elected official, but that are in newspapers? Because one of the best things is that one of the most interesting things that ever been said is basically that if you want to hide something from a black person, put it in a book.
Put it in a book.
And so, I'm not a great CNN fan. I'm not a great MSNBC fan. And I'm absolutely not a great Fox fan. So I can go weeks and months without watching any of them because I don't rely on them for my information. Because I know that their first job, as my first job as a publisher is to sell soap. It's not to sell journalism. It's to sell soap. To make sure that the clients that pay my bills understand what I do and support me in that problem. So what you get is you get a little bit of truth here and a little bit of truth there and a little bit of truth. And if you want to read the truth, you've got to have, between my wife and I, we probably read 6 or 7 newspapers a day. We divided up into she reads a certain group of newspapers and I read a certain group of newspapers. And then then I get, if I walk away from my computer for 2 hours, I'll have 300 emails in my computer when I come back. And if I walk away for a day, I have 3,000. And so everything from across the country, plus I'm a member of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, and there are 250 African-American newspapers across the country that are feeding me information about what they're doing in their local communities, what's happening in their local community, whether it's good or bad, what's going on in Africa, so forth. So I'm constantly being bombarded with knowledge. And I think the challenge basically is when I get in bed at night, sometimes I just won't turn the television on at all because I'm knowledge shallow. Because I've been exposed to so much information in that day that I just need some time to kind of have it register with me. But if your goal in life, as most of our goals when we started out were, is to be rich or to be comfortable financially, and you don't care how you get there, it's kind of like what Malcolm said, by any means necessary. But he didn't mean it in that tense, and he didn't mean it in that span. And I think some people take that term and they take it literally, and they look at, well, if I got more money than Leo with her, then I'm better than Leo with her. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. And as a pastor, you know this better than I do. He who dies with the most doesn't win.
No.
All of this stuff is material stuff.
And
you're not taking any of it. You haul behind her.
Somebody else is gonna wear your clothes, drive your car, live in your house. And someone else is gonna spend the money that you leave behind.
Exactly.
So it's only yours for a season. But I want to comment on what you were saying about information and being able to connect it. So for several years now, we've been looking at something on a global level called loss and damages. And what this is that as the climate impacts and weather-related disasters increase globally, you have people in developing countries that don't have a FEMA like us. They don't have home insurance. They don't have those financial mechanisms that we have, that when a tornado or hurricane strikes, you get financial relief to help you rebuild. And a lot of developing countries, they simply have to save their money and then build a room and live in that room and add on a room. And I'm talking about places like Jamaica. I'm not talking about remote places that people don't know about, but some of the places people visit. So one of the things that they've been talking about, one of the complaints that is going on right now, is that the United States and many of the powerful developing countries at United Nations meetings have not been saying, hey, we need to put money together, all the countries that belong to the United Nations, so that these poor people who save money all their life to build a home, and then when the tsunami comes, it's wiped out and they have to start over again from scratch, that there needs to be an international pot of money that those nations that don't have those financial mechanisms then draw money from. So here's the connecting piece. That I've been on some calls and in some meetings where the US State Department and others, congressional delegations, have said, you know what, the reason why we don't talk about loss and damages is because that's not a problem in the United States, and no one in the United States is talking about it. But I can tell you right here in South Carolina, there are people who have lost their homes, and because they live off an SSI check with $600 and couldn't afford homeowners insurance, who have lost their homes or had significant damage from Hurricane Florence and Hurricane Matthew, whose homes they weren't able to recover their homes, and now they're living with children or in a nursing home. So loss and damages is a global problem that also exists locally. And if our leaders were knowledgeable, not only in the community, but those who we elect to office were knowledgeable about that, then they would be pushing for that, not only in the state house, in the state senate, and in Congress, but they'd be talking about we need to provide global relief for the poor among us who, when weather-related disasters strike, don't have the resources and don't have the financial mechanism, access to the financial mechanism that allow them to repair their homes or replace their homes.
That's why I think you make a tremendous point. Matter of fact, you just opened my eyes to something.
Mhm.
And that whole concept you're talking about is an eye-opener in itself, because you are absolutely right. And with what we've been seeing in storms and in the climate in the last couple of years, the last few years, it's getting worse.
Mhm.
I looked at yesterday, I think it was, I was watching the Weather Channel, and no storm has come near the East Coast,
Mhm.
and it's September,
Right.
and no storm has really come near the East Coast,
Mhm.
because the water above where it normally is supposed to come is hotter than the water below.
Right.
And so it's going into the water, going into the northern hemisphere.
Mhm.
And the reality of that is that we got storms that are coming from Africa, turning out in the middle of the ocean and going back towards Britain.
Mhm.
And the reality of the situation is that I saw a study, I think a few months ago, that said that the French are having problems growing the grapes to make wine.
Yeah.
The actual the land that's the most fertile for doing that at this particular point is actually the British land,
Mhm.
which used to be
Mhm.
unheard of.
Too cold.
But it used to be too cold and too mushy and too much.
Mhm.
And now and too foggy, I guess. But the reality of it now is that the whole continent has changed. We got a storm off the coast of California that was threatening to basically flood all of Los Angeles, San Diego, and even into Vegas
Mhm.
in the last few days with 5 to 6 or 7 inches of rain, which is more rain than they get in a year.
That's right.
And so
So
we got. I think what you're saying is a simple message. What you're saying is we got to think about somebody other than ourselves.
Right.
And
And we also help ourselves because we have people who are getting lost and damages, and they're not able to access finances. to help them.
and that's what I'm saying. When you're talking about a system in place, it's like you said earlier. Okay, you get $600 a month in Social Security. Who in the heck can live on $600 a month on Social Security?
Mhm.
Even if you're 89 years old, your house is paid for, and you got some food stamps coming in. How many people you know can live off of $600 or $6,000, 600 or $2,000 or $3,000
Mhm.
in terms of that situation? So you got the people who have
Mhm.
who are consumed about getting, and they're not thinking about the people who don't have, and how those people survive. Like you
Mhm.
said, if my house got flooded, I got insurance, I got things to take care of to make sure that that I can take care of that. If somebody else's house over there in Nichols or someplace gets flooded, they may not have that opportunity.
Mhm.
They may have grown up a sharecropper all their lives. They may have grown up a farmer all their lives. They may have grown up. They may have not had access to the Social Security system.
Mhm.
So I think the challenge basically is, am I my brother's keeper?
Mhm.
And really comes down to that. So I think what we're kind of breaking new ground on is, what is our commitment? Because now the commitment that you talk about, you know where that commitment lies? With the Red Cross.
Right.
So if something happens in some foreign nation
Mhm.
that creates that kind of crisis, we're suggesting that we all give to the Red Cross.
Mhm.
And the Red Cross will take care of those homeless people and make sure that they have food, to make sure that they have clothing, and make sure that they have all the things that they need. And it's a voluntary system.
Mhm.
And that's all and well. But what happened when you had conflicts in the way that the world is now, when you have conflicts in 3 or 4 or 5 places, and people and organizations like the Red Cross, the World Food Program, with David Beasley runs, are overwhelmed.
They're overwhelmed. They don't have the resources now, what and the disconnect is that people don't realize that we, like you said, we are globally connected. So whether we're talking about silicon, semiconductor chip shortages, because most of them are made in Taiwan and that part of Asia, or we're talking about a food shortage of wheat because of the war in Ukraine, or what's happening with Russia and how that's driving up oil and gas prices. That what happens one place literally impacts all of us. And we're sitting here thinking that even when we talk about weather-related disasters, and I challenge anyone who looks at the news and the weather. Every day there's something going on with our climate. It's wildfires, it's flooding, it's extreme heat, it's extreme cold, it's tornado. Something is going on every day, not only in the USA but around the world. And the Red Cross and the Green Crescent and all of these organizations that help with disaster relief, they are overwhelmed. They're overwhelmed, and they don't have the resource. That's why people internationally are pushing for things like putting aside money globally for loss and damages, and looking for more financial mechanisms. That's going on now with the Federal Reserve. There's discussions going on with the insurance industry. There's a great organization called Private Citizen that's leading on many of those. With people talking about terminology. Nations don't want to use the words climate refugee, even though we know people are forced to move. But we adopted a family that still lives here in Florence after Hurricane Katrina, that came up to Florence and never left, right? And we helped them get established. But they don't want to use the word climate refugee. All of the nations, the developing nations, because according to global protocols with the United Nations, once you use the word refugee, in every nation, it triggers mechanisms where national governments then have to provide financial relief. And so a lot of things that if our leaders, because all politics are local, right? And even on the federal level or the state level, if they knew these things were going on, they could help to provide relief, not just globally, but to people who are going through here in this state and in their districts. And so that's, I know we got into that long and deep, but you triggered all this, Larry, when you talked about people who call themselves leaders who are not knowledgeable, who are not informed, and who are not experienced.
Well,
And that's why people are suffering.
Our leaders are more concerned with what color Beyonce's hair is, or what kind of dress and how low her dress is cut, than they are what true concerns of world affairs. And I can't speak for the rest of the world. I can only speak for Larry Smith. But Larry Smith is a person who's concerned about the world. He's concerned about Florence, South Carolina. He's concerned about the state of South Carolina. And he's concerned about the nation. And he's concerned about the world. And I think until we take that kind of a view and start to look at ourselves, not as just like you said earlier, not as just being a citizen of Florence, South Carolina, or a citizen of the United States, but a citizen of the world. My greatest ambition in the next few months is to go to Egypt, and experience Egypt for myself, because I believe that I can go to Hawaii and marvel at the beauty, but I can go to Egypt and go to the cradle of civilization.
That's right.
And that's more important to me. But I think we have so many people that are into the latest fashion, the latest house, the latest car, the latest material device, and they never think beyond attaining those things. Or they are taking a nice vacation someplace, but they don't take a vacation where they're going to learn something. They take a vacation where I have a great deal of respect for the Hawaiian people. I don't think if I got a choice between going to Kemet or going to Egypt and going to Hawaii, that's a hard choice for me, because I know that I'm going to learn a lot more going to Egypt and going to Kemet than I am going to Hawaii. Right. I'm going to see some amazing sights in Hawaii. I mean, I've seen some online and through video, but I'm going to see where science and mathematics began.
Civilization.
And how it began with people who look like us. And I think, I guess it comes down to a very simple thing, and we can kind of move on from here. It comes down to a very simple thing. What are your goals in life?
Right.
What are your priorities in life? What do you want? Are you happy just to have a nice house and a nice car and a couple of dollars in your bank account?
If you have that money.
Or to strive for those things if you don't have them, to at least strive for them. Are you happy just to have those things? Or do you think you owe the world more than that? That you owe the world your efforts, your time, your energy, and your resources to make this world a better place for everybody, not just for Black folk, or not just for white folk, or not for Asian folks, and not just for Hispanic folk, but for everybody. Right. Because at the end of the day, the bottom line is, this is only one rock. And we all live on this rock. And as much as Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk want to have their space program, the reality of it,
there is no planet B that we know of yet.
But they are trying to develop an alternative to this particular planet. And the reality of it is that they may be able to colonize the moon. They may be able to colonize Mars in 20 to 30 years. They may be able to colonize Mars. And what do they accomplish?
Yeah.
What are they trying to accomplish? Are they trying to get away from people they don't want to be around? Their ego is that they want to find a new frontier.
That's what it is.
They want to
New
use
worlds to conquer.
they want to use the model of Star Trek. You know that says, you know, the boldly go where no man has ever gone before.
New worlds to conquer. You know, like the history tells the story of Alexander the Great, who died, you know, I think at the age of 30 or a little bit older, who actually stood and looked after he had sent his troops into India and he had conquered, you know, Alexandria. Egypt is named after him. And he literally cried because he saw no more no more worlds, no more places he could conquer. And that's what those people are like. They're just looking for new places they could conquer, new empires, financial, whatever, that they could create. But I want to say too that when you see yourself as a global citizen, you also see opportunity. So when I was in Ghana, I saw maybe one or two American-made cars. I saw a bunch of cars from Europe, and I saw a lot of Tatas, which are cars that are manufactured in India, which means that you could actually invest in other corporations worldwide. I met a young lady just this past week who is selling products that she makes and that she buys wholesale, right, directly from factories that she's selling on Amazon. You know, so while people are sitting here struggling, selling a few things at the flea market or other places, there's a whole world out there of opportunities if you see yourself as a global citizen and not just a citizen of North Florence or South Florence, etc. So,
well, you know, the funny thing about that, Reverend Woodbury, is that two things happened. Back in the 70s, Reverend Jesse Jackson and a couple of other people tried to push that issue of developing a relationship, a business relationship of countries in Africa.
right. And Marcus Garvey, long
And
before that.
Marcus Garvey, long before that, but Jesse Jackson tried. And when young man from the Clinton administration, the Clinton administration that was headed in the Commerce Department,
Right,
Ron Brown. Ron Brown, yeah. When he got killed,
and that terrible.
that whole movement seemed to have died with him. And it's ironic because I was reading in the Atlanta Journal, in the Atlanta Voice, which is a black newspaper in Atlanta. I think 10 black newspapers in Atlanta. But there was a roundtable discussion, and some African leaders had come to a place in Atlanta where they were sitting down with black business people and saying to them, this is how we would like to see you invest in Africa. These are the opportunities that exist in Africa at this particular point. And this was last week. And these are the opportunities. And we need more of that. We need, you know, it's one thing for me to go to Kemet and say, okay, I'm going to Kemet, I'm going to Egypt, and I'm going to see the sights and I'm going to experience the life. But can I come back with a business opportunity that's going to benefit the people in Egypt? It's going to benefit the people in America. That's the whole point of a trip like that.
Right. And
develop a business relationship because, you know, like you said, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. I said to somebody, it must be 10, 15 years ago, and I know I've shared it a few once or twice. If we said we were going to just take African furniture as a starting point, if we hired in North Carolina some master furniture makers, and we sent them to Africa to train some indigenous people and some tribal people, and then we let them make the furniture. And you got places like King Street, South Carolina,
Mhm.
would have all of these tobacco warehouses that are no longer being, that you could actually ship the product here
Mhm.
and distribute it around the world
Right.
from here. And that's the kind of partnership that we need to be looking at. That's the kind of opportunity that we need to be looking at. It's a broad scale opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to say, okay, I'd like to have some authentic African furniture in my house.
Mhm.
And I'm sure you as well. And people all over the world, it's, made out of mahogany wood,
Mhm.
from some of the best trees in the world. Those kinds of things.
Mhm.
So how do you get there?
Well, those opportunities exist. So one thing I can tell you right now that Amazon is in the process of building one of its largest distribution centers in the world in South Africa, because people on the African continent are buying stuff from Amazon. I can tell you for a fact that some of the nonprofit work that we do in Tanzania and some other places, that we've been shipping things like solar lanterns and peak flow meters and diabetic testing equipment and stuff to Africa, which costs a lot of money coming from the US to go to Africa. But when this distribution center is this huge distribution center is set up in South Africa so that they are able to get, because Amazon retail people, anybody can sell stuff on Amazon when you go through the paperwork and process. So we can actually be selling things that are made in Africa on Amazon to come to the US. And then also things in the US could be sold through Amazon and that South African distribution warehouse. So there's all these things in place, but for African Americans, we have to, one, realize the opportunities and come together, put our resources together. And because so many of us are struggling just to pay the bills and working two jobs and those sorts of things, to keep our children safe and healthy and give them a future. That's once again when you talked about Jesse Jackson, but we talked about early in the 20th century Marcus Garvey, when we talked about Leon Sullivan at OIC. Our leaders are not opening the doors for things like that because they're not informed and they're too busy trying to figure out how they can advance themselves financially, how they can build power for themselves individually, and how they can make a name for themselves, and forgetting the fact that the only reason they're sitting where they're sitting is because other people pushed the opportunity and made a way for them, as they're supposed to be making a way for the constituents they're supposed to be serving. And
Well,
we'll let it go.
they haven't, and I think, you know, it's becoming a challenge to get people to think globally.
Mhm.
You know, you got the meta fear and all of those other things, and things are coming at people so fast
Mhm.
that, for a large point, they're coming so fast that they're not getting a chance to comprehend what they're dealing with.
Mhm.
And so they're absolutely not getting a chance to deal with the opportunities that
Mhm.
come with it. You know, some of the younger kids are seeing it in technology, are seeing it, but the older people don't see it. And they're so busy trying to maintain the status quo,
Mhm.
be a quote unquote stakeholder in
Mhm.
the community, or lack of a better term, and that they don't really care. You know, one of the things this week that shows us, Bernard Shaw died.
Yes, CNN.
And Bernard Shaw, most people don't realize that Bernard Shaw actually has roots in the people.
Oh, I didn't know that.
His wife,
CNN's first
yeah,
anchor, one of the first black male anchors. Yeah.
but his wife is from Garland.
Wow.
Matter of fact, this week he and I think the other anchor at that time, and I can't remember his name, but they married two sisters
Mm-hmm.
from Darlington. And matter of fact, their father was on the board. The young lady's father was on the board of Francis Marion University at one point. And we will miss Bernie Shaw.
Yes, we will.
Because he was our role model.
Mm-hmm.
He was our standard. He showed us how far we could go. And so I think we'll miss him. And then God bless the Queen. You know.
Oh yeah.
And
Hail Britannia.
you know, the challenge basically is that she did look the other way on colonialism.
Mm-hmm.
She did look she did look the other way on racism as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
As Megan says in the speech that you read, she talks about it at a particular point. But she ruled for 70 years.
Mm-hmm.
I was telling you the other day that her husband, Lord Mountbatten, was
Mm-hmm.
the person who actually turned over India back to
Right.
the Indians.
Right.
And so they have a storied history
Mm-hmm.
and almost a storybook history.
Mm-hmm.
And now with King Charles III, I guess that legacy will continue.
Yeah, see, what a lot of people don't understand, her predecessor, Queen Elizabeth and Queen Victoria, they ruled over the British Empire.
Mhm.
They had plenty of money and power. This queen, what she actually did was she ruled over the dismantling of the British Empire. And so while she was queen, we saw India become free. We saw Pakistan form. We saw Kenya no longer be a colonial a colony of Britain and so many other places.
Mhm.
So she actually, and I think that's in large part why she didn't speak out on things. Not only the racism and the bigotry and the colonialism that Britain had, that history that they had, where, well, let me not speak to that. Let me not speak to the dismantling of what was once one of the world's greatest empires, because they, Hail Britannia, Britannia rules the world, Britannia rules the waves, which, by the way, the royal family gets a lot of their money from the fact that the royal family still owns a lot of ports and stuff in the United Kingdom, and they get a piece of all the revenue that passes through.
I think the challenge that they have at this point is, and I don't know what year it was, but they were kind of unplugged from the political power of Britain. They basically are, for all practical purposes, a symbol. And
Figurehead.
They're figureheads, and they don't have any power. They can't change any law in Britain. They can't do anything that normally a monarch would be able to do if they were in control. And I think at the end they're just holding on to the towers.
Yeah.
Because when you think about it, that's what they are. It's just a tower. King Charles III.
Right.
That's just a title. He doesn't have any power. He doesn't have any ability to do anything. He can't elect anybody to Parliament. He can't even speak to Parliament unless Parliament invites him to speak.
Right.
And so the whole idea of who they are and what they are is kind of simple. I guess it's indicative of the Great White Way.
Right, and the interesting thing is that she was so quiet and tight-lipped. and would not say what her position was on so many different things. Parliamentary members had to apologize to her when she, let slip one remark where she said that she was happy that Ireland hadn't, become completely independent of Britain, that they kept some ties and they let it slip that she had said that and they had to apologize. But the interesting thing is going to be that King Charles III has expressed opinions about climate change and other things. And so it's going to be interesting to see if he's going to make comments on position, or is he going to, continue that royal heritage, recent royal heritage of keeping his lips sealed when it comes to the opinions of the monarchy and the royal family. That's going to be interesting to see because
I think it's very well.
he's taken he stated his opinion on a lot of positions, and now he's either going to have to be quiet or keep pushing those positions. So that's going to be interesting.
A couple of things before we end for the day, Reverend Woodbury. One, the Biden plan to forgive student loans,
Right.
which I think is an excellent plan.
Absolutely.
I think it's this. I wish it could go a little bit further, but I think it's an excellent plan. But the state of South Carolina joined 12 other states and decided that they wanted to tax the actual loan forgiveness program. And I thought that was the most selfish and the most petty thing that they could do. First of all, if you're getting a PAG grant, that means that you're not doing well financially.
No.
And so what it seems like is that the conservatives in the state of South Carolina have come up with this idea that we need to tax. Now let's be clear on this. Conservatives in South Carolina have never seen a tax that they like. That never in their lives have they seen a tax that they like. But now all of a sudden they want to create a tax on poor people. And I'm going, excuse me? You've been against any and every tax for the last 50 years. That's what you run office for. And now you're saying that you want to tax poor people who are getting their loans forgiven? Not because you have to, not because it's going to be a financial gain to you, but because you can. So I think that's pretty interesting.
It's political pushback. That's all.
And it's scary, and which leads me to the kind of the bottom line. The last line here is, if there was any reason why we need to get out and vote and get our mothers and our sisters and our brothers and our cousins and our uncles and everybody else out to vote, and not depend on what we think is going to happen because of Roe versus Wade, not depend on what we think is going to happen because of some of the other things that happened over the last year or two, including the George Floyd situation, but to depend on the fact that we got to vote in the number that we voted for Obama, because we have got to get control. The Senate, and we have got to maintain control of the House. And on the local level in the state of South Carolina, the fact that we have the governor's office being controlled by a conservative, the Senate being controlled by a conservative, the House being controlled by a conservative, and all of the statewide offices being controlled by a conservative. What does that tell you? That we're in danger of losing some major gains that we gained over the last 30, 40, 50 years if we don't get out and vote. You can stay home and say it doesn't matter, it ain't gonna count. You can do what you want to do, But at the end of the day, it's going to come.
Mhm.
And as I saw somebody say the other day, that we've been here before
Right.
and we had to overcome it.
Mhm.
The question is, can we overcome it again?
People,
And I believe that we can't stress the importance of getting out the vote.
right. People have to learn to vote for not only their own interests, but the interests of their neighbors, and to realize that we live in a world now that a shortage of silicone chips, a shortage of wheat, um, uh, hurricanes, weather-related disasters, wildfires, forgiveness for student loans. None of those things care if you're Republican or Democrat. They don't care if you're white or black. That they either will provide relief for everyone, or they will provide a hardship for everyone through taxation and whatever. So we got to get out of these political cocoons that we're in, and people have to realize that they need to vote, that they need to be voting for the interests of themselves and for their community, and leave this political foolery alone, because it is devastating our communities, and it is threatening our democracy. And it makes no sense whatsoever. But we have to close. And Larry, you and I always, we can talk and talk and talk, but we're coming to the closing time. And I was thinking about the days when your office and mine were next door to each other, or we were on the same block, and how we would stand out on the porch and just talk like we're doing right now. And it's always so good and so great to hear all the ideas and originality and the fresh perspectives that you have. And I hope that our audience does as well. So why don't you tell people how they can reach you, and I'll tell them how they can reach us, and hope that they'll join us again next week.
Well, you can reach me at Larry Smith, 843-621-0056. That's my cell phone. And you can also reach me at my office at 843-667-1818. You can reach me by email at dsmith7716@aol.com. You can reach me at Larry SC African Village at hotmail.com. And we have 3 websites that are willing to go. And as Reverend Whitberry said, we're always talking. We're always trying to figure out where we're going to go and how we're going to go and how we're going to improve quality of life, not just for us as individuals, but for our community as a whole. So at this point, I'm Larry and he's
Leo. Yes, and you can reach us, New Alpha Community Development Corporation or Kingdom Living Temple, by going to www.newalphacdc.com, or by email by going to info@newalphacdc.com, or by calling us at Kingdom Living Temple at 843-799-0740. And so until next week, this time, God willing, let us remember, tune into the Larry and Leo show, where you'll learn the things that can take you to higher heights, and you'll learn about things that can help you improve the lives of yourself, your family, your community, and our world. Take care.
About what
And
you
be safe.
know, it's about where you go. If you really want to know, it's the Leo Larry Show. It's about what you know. It's about where you go. If you really want to know, it's the Leo Larry Show.